So, hello everyone. Thank you for coming for another office hour here at Hostaway. Right. So it is a pleasure to have you here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andrew. I'm a customer success engineer responsible for training, sharing best practices. How can you perform better using our software, using the channels that you have available, using our services that we also have at your disposal? And today we are here to talk about Vrbo, and what have we learned, with our top performing listings, right? So before before I get started here, I'd like to say a couple of things that I'm often asked, right? So the office hours are recorded, right? So you will receive a link to watch this webinar, this office hours tomorrow. 24 hours later, it will be automatically sent to you, right? So you don't have to take notes, or in case you cannot attend in real time, you can always watch it later. Just register and you'll be able to watch it later, right? It is a practical session. So it is important that you ask questions, right? So you're encouraged to ask questions. It's not about theory, but it's about learning how to use and take advantage of the software, right? So please use the Q&A at any time. All right. So now, some of you that have already been here, before, I've seen some, you know, some of you have already been on the previous webinars. So what is this? What is different? This time that we are talking about Vrbo, right? So if you haven't been, that's all right. We have a lot of information here for you that, and I hope you can take advantage of that. For those of you that have already been here, we did this time that was different was, okay, you probably noticed and you have been using, in our product, we have AI uh, for descriptions, for the content management, right? So we are using that. We have been using for messages as well. AI has been evolved a lot. We have been using for dynamic pricing. So we have been using AI in several different features, on our software, and we keep improving and we keep adding new features, right? What you haven't seen is AI being used here, to process the data and show us some stats, right, on how some of the best practices that we share, they impact your performance, right? Your listings performance on the channel. So we use AI today, specifically for data about performing listings performing on Vrbo channel, right? So I hope you enjoy. I hope it can be useful for you, right? So let's get started, right? So instant booking, right? So that's something that I always recommend most of my clients because instant booking, it's not only about short-term rental, right? It is something that affects anyone that ever worked with e-commerce knows that one thing is to go research something and then you want to buy and it's not available, right? It's out of stock, for example, and there is no inventory of what you want to buy, right? So that's a bummer. Nobody wants that. Everybody that comes to a website and it's interest on buying something, they want to buy it, right? So they don't want another step before they complete the purchase, right? So it's always recommended to use instant booking for that, right? And short-term rental is not different, right? So we went after the data to see, okay, what is the performance impact, that having that will make uh, on your business, right? So first, search impressions impact, right? So search impression is someone, a guest, potential guest, in your case, it is looking for a property to stay, right? So a listing where they want to book. So it impacts, right? So you will, your listing will show up, 17% on average, right? Everything that I'm sharing here is on average, right? So of course, depending on the type of properties, that you're managing, depending on your region and everything, depending on many factors, maybe, slightly higher or slightly lower, right? But on average, the search impressions impact, it will increase your performance by 17%. You will appear on searches, right? So it is, as you can see, you have more chances of getting a booking because people are seeing you more often, right? So you're reaching more people than before. Okay. So then, by the way, I'm getting some answers here. I just ask a little bit, of patience. I'm going to cover a little bit here, on stats, and then I show you how to get things done on the dashboard, right? But you can keep posting, your questions here, and I will be glad to address that in a minute. All right. So, but before I want to show you the reason why, right? So many times we talk about what is the recommendation. But now today, I want to share some data with you as well, right? Some analysis that was done, right? And then, this is very impressive, right? So when I saw this number, I said, okay, now this is huge, right? So the difference between a listing that has a request to book and the other one that is on instant booking can have an impact on more than 44%, 44% on average, on the number of bookings that you receive per listing, right? So if you don't have a very good reason to be on request to book, I believe that it speaks for itself, right? So it is an amazing difference, between one and another, right? So 44% more bookings is not something, that any business, could or should not pay attention to, right? It is something that is to be considered. Now, moving forward, amenities, right? I will show you amenities. You know how many amenities we have. Hundreds of amenities. We have on Hostaway, they're mapped, to many channels, and of course to Vrbo as well, right? So now, what is the impact that selecting one amenity or not selecting one amenity, can make? Like I said, we have hundreds, right? So I picked one that is many times overlooked, which is location type, but I know that it has a high impact, on Vrbo, right? And we ran an analysis on that. So what we found out, you see, search impressions impact, it is 63%, right? So the chances of someone seeing your listing increases, tremendously if you have that selected, right? Well, what is location type? Location type could be uh, the beach, it could be a lake, it could be mountain, it could be downtown, right? So it doesn't have necessarily to be related to the nature, but it's basically the value that your listing is bringing, right? Someone is looking for a place to stay. If they're looking to stay, in downtown or in the mountain, it is a huge difference, right? So they're looking for something specific. And this is one of the main filters on Vrbo, right? So that's why I selected this amenity here, to it is on the amenities section, right? So, but location type, I'm going to show you where to find that. And if you're missing that, you're missing a lot of potential buyers here, right? Potential guests. So it will appear 63%, more on search results, right? So pay attention to that. And I'm going to show you. Let's see if I have it. And on the page that I can show here. Yeah, I will show you in a minute how you can see that information, also on Vrbo side, right? Now, photos. And I'm going to show you on Hostaway, and I'm going to show here, on Vrbo as well, right? So why is that important? Photo recommendation by Vrbo, right? So they recommend that you have close to 50, right? Or 50 photos. Of course, it could be that you don't have that many, but you should consider adding as many photos as possible, right? And so when I say as many photos as possible, of course, the quality will make a difference, right? So high quality photos, they make a difference. But some of the data that I'm bringing here, it's more about quantitative data, than really the quality of the photo, right? Of course, a good photo, everybody here, in this office hour is aware that a high quality photo sells more, than a poor quality photo, right? So that's the bare basic, of short-term rentals is having an appealing photo, right? So having photos of mountains or any uh, attraction that you have near your property, right? If it is the sports that you provide, it could be different angles that you're talking about. It could be about the vibe, the decoration, of your property. All that has an impact, right? But let's talk specifically about number of photos here so that you can see, right? So, and I use 30 plus photos, right? So not even 50. I'm not even talking about the full amount of photos, right? Only the fact that you have more than 30 photos, right? The clients that use that, they have 57% more page views impact, right? So it is displayed more often, the page if you have the photo, right? People will search for that. People will be interested on that, and they will click on it, right? So they want to see the photos, right? It brings a lot of value, and you can see 57% is a lot, right? So if you think the photo is not important, think twice, right? Number of photos, yes, also important, right? So not only quality and having all the attractions, everything that you're offering, it is important, but also number of photos will have an impact. And then guess what? Bookings per listings on listings that have more than 30 photos, they have 29% more bookings on average, right? So it is huge, right? So, and then we are talking about something that is very easy to accomplish, right? So this is not something that you don't have to buy anything, right? So it's just adding more photos and you will perform a lot better, right? So 30% cannot be ignored, right? And not even talking about the quality, not even talking about, you know, having photos of kayaks, bicycles, things that you also share. So related to the full experience, I'm talking just about number of photos, right? So it is something to be considered, take into consideration. Another big one, that we noticed was pets, right? So I have many clients that say that, well, I do not allow pet, right? So, and the reason why is because then I have to pay more to the cleaner. It demands a deep cleaning after the pet stay. So, but I have some other clients, on the other hand, that they say, well, it's very profitable to me, right? So I allow pet, I didn't use to. So then I did a test, right? So I implemented in one of the listings, and then I realized that this is something huge, right? So we had a property manager, some time ago, Krista, that uses pet they use pet as part of the brand, for example, right? So you can go way into pet, and but it's also important, regardless if you like it or not. I know that most of you like, but many people are concerned about the pet destroying things or maybe the cleaning, right? So you can always buy insurance. Insurance will take care of that. One of the things, that an insurance can cover that for you. But most important, cleaning, all right, you can pay more. But let's see the reality, right? The financial reality on what is the impact on the revenue that you can get, by allowing pets. So here, if you see the impact, on views that you have, like, all right, so many people will be more interested on it, right? So there are many people that are traveling with pets. This is more and more common. It is a trend, and it has an impact on sales, of course, right? So if people are saying, I keep saying page views, search results. So there is a funnel, right? For those of you who are not familiar with the terminology, there is a sales funnel, right? Every time you're trying to buy something, whoever is selling you is paying attention to the funnel. So first is you have to appear on the search, right? If you're not appearing on the search result, so you don't even classify to get to the final sale, right? So when you're trying to reach the guest, first you have to show up on the search, right? So if someone is looking for the property, if you're not listed there, okay, so you have zero chance of getting a reservation, from that guest. The other one is page view, right? So someone clicked on your page and they want to see more about your property. Okay, that would be a little down the funnel, the sales funnel. So you're getting closer to get the reservation. So that's why I'm not sharing only the sales, the final sales number, like number of bookings, not even talking in money or revenue, but I'm talking on bookings because, yeah, a big property, if you have to compare like a high end property with a low end property, of course, the revenue would be proportional, right? So that's why I'm using the metric here, the KPI. I'm using number of bookings, right? So page view is very important because it means that you have already passed through the search and someone decided to view your property, right? Now, so 62%, it is a lot, right? This is how you're comparing to a listing that does not accept pets, right? So huge. And now the most amazing one, right? So I was amazed when I saw this number, right? So they can get 47% on average more bookings than a listing that does not accept pet. Now, going back to that thought of, yeah, but then I have to pay more to the cleaner, right? Or maybe I may need an insurance, to make sure that it's covered for that. So put that into account, and consider if it is a good business or not for you, right? Most cases, many of my clients, unless the property owner is completely against, but even property owners, as a property manager, if you show this kind of numbers, they might reconsider, their opinion about things, right? Because it is it is a business, right? So when we're talking about 47% more reservation, especially in, for someone that is concerned about the occupancy, it is an amazing difference, right? So if you're not running, around 80, 90% of occupancy, you're concerned about that, right? And then this could be an excellent way. And keep in mind, right, if you're allowing pets, you don't have to decrease your average daily rate, right? The other way around, you can even increase because there is less sensitivity, to price for someone that is bringing pets, right? Not even talking about the upsell, right? Because you can still uh, sell an additional fee, for each pet that is coming in, right? So there is a lot of revenue involved here, not only statistically, number of bookings, but also on the upsell on putting a pet fee. And many pet owners, they don't mind, they want their concept of a perfect vacation, and a good time is with their pet, right? So we have to be mindful of what the client is looking for, right? And this is huge, huge impact, right? Wow. Cancellation policy. These ones are common ones. I'm going to show you. I didn't bring, data about that. New listing promotion, also a big one. But I concentrated on the main ones that I could see major impact with very little change, right? The pet is not a small one because if your listing does not accept, you may have to adapt things. But the other ones like policy, cancellation policy, number of photos, those are super, super simple, right? To get accomplished, right? Payment schedule, I'm going to talk a little bit more. New listing promotion, also a big one. It does have an impact, especially on new listings. And that's it, right? So as always, I don't intend to spend too much time, on the slide decks because we rather spend more time here on the dashboard, right? And show you how to get things done. But I thought it was important to bring some data, to validate. Maybe some of you already knew that it had an impact, but didn't know how that impacted. These numbers are based on numbers, data shared by Vrbo, with Hostaway, and numbers from inside Hostaway and our top performers, right? So we could compare, how a top performing was selling more, than other clients, right? So I already have some questions here. I'm going to start with the questions, right? So going over some of them, and then I show some of the things that I didn't bring data, specific about that. But of course, we already know in general everything that I bring here. It is because we discuss with the channels, right? So this is not something that were made up, you know. But I thought it was important to show some data behind it, right? So how did we get there, right? But this kind of information, for example, the topics, that we are covering, they were shared by Global, right? So, and if we're talking about Airbnb, they're shared by Airbnb about from Booking and so on, right? So we are always in contact with the channels, to bring what do they recommend, to sell more in their channels, right? Because we have the softer side, that we integrate as much as possible. That's why we are a lead partner, with Vrbo and always on top classification with any OTA, but it's not just about software, right? It is also about setting up your property and being ready, making it ready to accept more reservations, than your competitors. Right? So, well, I'm going to start with how can I verify if I'm instant booking, right? So if I'm using instant booking. So everything that I described, on the data, they're related to listings, right? So if you want to go to listings, you come here, you come to edit, and then you can see most of the information here. And then you see this one, for example, is a no, right? So you just select yes, and it becomes instant bookable, right? So this one is my test account, right? So many of the things you may look here, you say, Andrew, you're recommending us to do something, but the listing that you're showing is not that way. It is because it is a test listing, right? So it's a test account. So I cannot share a live account, for many of our clients for privacy reasons, right? So it is a fast one. And again, right? So I'm inside listings on additional information and policies, right? Well, since I'm here, I might as well show the other ones, that I'm talking about, right? So I also talked about, well, photos, right? So you can add your photos here. You can add captions for the photos. Again, right? You can see 4 photos here. You can say, Andrew, really? Only 4? Yeah, of course, right? So this is not the real one, right? Not a real case. It's just for demos, right? And then you can add as many photos as you want, right? So yeah, make sure that you add all the photos, and always use the captions as well, right? Because they help to describe, to the guest on the final end, what is the photo about, right? Sometimes it is super clear, sometimes not so clear, right? And so it's good to add additional information always, right? When we are talking about short-term rental, because now going back to the funnel again, so some of your guests, they will prefer to look at the photos and spend a lot of time on photos. They will not even read the descriptions. Some of them, the other way around, right? They prefer to read the descriptions. They want to go over each one of the details. Some of them will look through amenities and they will compare properties, right? So if they find 2 properties, you and your competitor right by your side, right? And with similar prices, similar properties, the end of the day, the difference could be inside amenities, right? It could be like, hey, this one is offering, X, that is more than the other one. And they may decide for that, right? In my experience, many amenities can be selected, and even the number of amenities has a huge impact, right? So, and I'm saying that because we see the high performing listings, they usually have more amenities than the average one, right? And some of them could be very, very simple implementation. It could be, of course, an elevator would be a giant one, right? But extra pillows and blankets, not so much, for example, right? So yeah, it makes a difference because when the guest looks, when someone is trying to book your property, the more they see, the more value they believe that they're taking, out of making a reservation here, right? But now going specifically, to that location type that I described, right? So here we have each one of this section here can be open, and then you have many fields, right? Well, what I noticed in many cases, especially if you're new with Hostaway, you know, I noticed this happening uh, more often, right? Which is uh, you come to Hostaway, then you were not using Vrbo, or you were, then you import the listings in the onboarding process. You import the listings from Airbnb. When we import the listings from Airbnb, it brings everything, but everything that you have already set up on Airbnb, right? Then, if you want to push that information to Vrbo, Vrbo has amenities is a good example, of that. They have many more fields here that can be used that not necessarily are mapped to both, right? To Airbnb and Vrbo. So in that case, if you have oceanfront, lake view, for example, right? So you might be missing here if you don't review this type of information, right? So I always recommend to every property manager to come to this section here at least once a month and review everything that you have. Check the boxes that are not checked by any chance you're missing. Uncheck the boxes of things that are broken. For example, let's say you had a toaster broke, you didn't have time to buy another one, remove it, right? Otherwise, you risk getting a bad review just because you promised the toast. Someone really wanted to have a toast and the toaster was not there, right? So make sure that you remove and check for, quick wins, right? So there are a couple of things that maybe you can offer. You haven't paid attention, but it could be a checklist, to review things that you're offering, right? But location time, this is a must, right? This one here, it's not a nice to have. This one is a must. So make sure that you have it. And sometimes, you see, if you have a lake view, very likely, you're by the lake, right? So, and sometimes lakefront. So you can check more than one in many cases, right? But it's not okay, so already got here. Yeah, but I'm not by the lake, not by the beach. Yeah, but we have downtown, we have city view, right? So we have some other ones, some of them mapped, of course, some of them will be mapped to more than one channel, right? But check because there are many here, right? And since we are here, there are many other ones, that you should not overlook. All right. So that one is the one with the highest impact, when checking out the data. But there are several different ones that many times I see the photos, I see everything there, just by looking at the photos. But then when I come here, boxes are not checked, right? Boxes not being checked. That means that when someone is going, let me see here. Let me show you what I'm talking about, for example. So this is a front end page, right? So how the guest is seeing the information. When they come here, let me increase the size. Yeah, right. So when they come here, they look for Miami, right? They selected the dates, they added the gas. So what are they going to do now? Next step, on the customer journey, they're going to filter, right? They're going to look here. It could be price, it could be the popular ones, right? You see here, this are location type. That's why it is so relevant, to have location type. It's not the only one. There are some other filters, that can be selected, but it could be price, it could be room, it could be, but as you can see, this one is the most popular, right? And then it could be filters, and then there are other ones, that will be taken into consideration. And most of them will be available from amenities, right? But location time, it is a giant one. And why do I bring attention to it? Because if it is on Airbnb, the, the proportion is not that relevant, checking that field, right? It is a little different, actually very different. So some channels you have to pay attention and think about the journey inside that channel, right? So I always recommend go to the front end of the OTA and try to see as a guest, but not just your listing, right? Because of course this is important. I already got this question here. I, I believe it was Bill that asked. So how do I see my listing, in the channel? It's here, right? So you just go to listings and here you can click here and uh, you'll open a link and you see your property, how the guest is seeing your property, right? That would be the page view. But remember, we have all the searching process before we get to the page view, right? So page view is important. Yes, it is, because it means that the information that you're adding here is being displayed correctly, right? But some of the things that I'm discussing is before that. Is like, all right, how do we get from here to your property, right? And here is where you can miss many opportunities here, right? Because people didn't go there. When they get to your property, of course, they have to convert, right? And then book. This is the best, right? But there is the entire journey, and you have to keep that in mind. Now, going back here. So that was on instant booking. What else did I share with you? And then here, so here, okay, since we're here, let's talk about cancellation policy, right? Oh, no, before I go there. Someone was had already asked me, Bill had already asked me about pet. Can I charge more? Yes, you can, Bill. So that's a very good question. So you can add, first of all, you can add here. So it is an upsell, right? So you're making more money, or charging for the path. It's not like, okay, I make more reservation, but it increased my cost. It's not just occupancy, you know, against cost. It also means that you can charge more. You can charge per path. You can charge per path per night, and you can also increase your rates, right? So you can even do both, right? Of course, be mindful, on what you're doing, but because of the number of bookings, and on how more attractive your listing will become, you know, you can increase in some of the data that we checked in another study. We noticed that even the rate, the daily rate can also be increased. Plus, you still have the fee, right? About the cleaning. Okay, at the end of the day, it is a balance, right? So if you're adding the pet fee, you know, should you increase the cleaning? Maybe not, right? Because you're already making money here and making money on the rate that you have increased. But again, right? It's all an equation, a balance that you find, which one works best for your property, right? Maybe you can add a lot, for the pet and not touch the rates at all, right? Or it could be a combination of everything, right? Yeah, Stephen is asking about cancellation policy, if it made any impact. Yes, it does have a huge impact, right, on cancellation policy. I just don't have specific data, for today. I got some of them, but I can bring, some other time, cancellation policy. They do make, right? And why is that? So, because when we come here, put yourself, on the guest shoes, right? So if if you have a cancellation that is very flexible, it's more likely that the guest is going to book, right? So because first of all, we can use the booking window, for example. That is a very real example and an actual example, right? So it's shrinking, right? It's getting closer and closer to most of the markets, that I talk to. It's smaller now, right? So people used to book a lot longer before, now they're booking closer from their stay, right? And why is that? Because they are not sure about their plans, right? They are not sure if they will be able to make it, if they have to change anything, if they have to pay for a cancellation, for example. So the more flexible you are, more likely you also are to get an early reservation, with a wider booking window, because the guests uh, uh, the cancellation rate that you have. And you see that is not that many. I have many clients that when they're putting the cancellation policy, they're very concerned with the number of cancellations. But then you have to calculate, all right, so if I have a very flexible cancellation policy, how much that increases my sale? And you can do that even with an A/B test, right? With a listing, with two similar listings, and see, okay, so with one listing, I'm going to be more strict. The other one, I will be more flexible, right? And then you compare and see the cancellation, because even if you have cancellations on the other one, maybe on the overall income, the revenue, you made more money, even compared with the cancellations, right? So I know cancellation is a bummer, especially for occupancies. Sometimes it is too close to the time to get a new reservation. But maybe, when you calculate, in my experience, the flexible one, the amount of revenue that it brings usually surpasses, the cancellation impact that you have, right? So it is still more profitable, long story short, right? Now, trying to find the balance again, right? It will vary depending on your competitors, right? Because if your competitors are all flexible and you are not, okay, then you're really in trouble, right? Because unless you're offering something that you're the only one offering, okay, it's going to be complicated for you to compete, right? So the guests will be more likely to look for uh, one more flexible. I can give you a personal example. You know, I never book something that is not refundable, right? But many guests they do, you know, choose that, right? So it is possible, yes. Uh, Maybe it is a relation, you know, with price that you want to impose, and then you offer is strict. Yes, depending on the channel, like if it is a booking or Expedia, you can even use a non-refundable rate, right, to do that difference. Go to questions. Okay. Hi, Elena. Thanks for the question. So Elena is asking if we are about to add the non-refundable discount for Vrbo. Uh, I'm not sure if it is available on the API, you know, because they have just made a recent change. So I don't know the answer for that, right? So if they have on their API, yes, very likely we will implement, right? So we try to implement 100% of Airbnb and Vrbo, you know, as soon as they come up, right? So Vrbo just made a huge revamp, you know, on the integration. Most of you know, if you go to channel manager and select Vrbo, you see that even the way the information is displayed has changed, right? And the update of the information is also done in real time when before it used to be 24 hours, right? So we were the first one to implement. So our team was working on that. I don't know about the new, any new APIs that they're coming up, you know, if this is already on the pipeline. But I'm going to check. Thanks for the question. If it is available, it will be implemented, but it would be a matter of when. And Heather gave me a good question here. That is not that the other ones are not, sorry, but some are more complex than other, you know, and I and some of them are unrelated, right? So I try to focus and prioritize the ones, you know, related to the topics here. And of course, we have time, we go over everything regardless, right? So we are here to learn the most that we can, right? So Heather is asking me about description, right? If it is when adding amenities, if it is effective to add description. Yes, it is. And just keep in mind, this is specific for Vrbo, right? So when we are using this one is very clear, for example. So because some channels they will not accept the description, or some fields will not accept the description, right? But this description here, it usually goes to Vrbo, right? Some of the channels they only have the field. That's it, right? So you check the box, that is the field. Vrbo allows not only the field, but also the description, you know, that goes with the amenity, like an additional information. So to answer your question, yes, every time you can provide additional information, go for it, right? It helps. It helps. Okay, Olivia is asking me why should we check amenities once a month? Well, is to make sure that everything that you have checked before is still working. You know, it all depends, of course, on your maintenance, right? So if anything, let's say you have yeah, the toaster is the best example, that I can come up because it is something that it can break, for example, right? If you remove that as soon as you break, if anything uh, is not available to the guest, then you don't have to come, right? But why it is important? Sometimes you miss things, or sometimes you buy new things and forget to add here, right? So it's kind of a maintenance of your listings, right? Of your listing content. That's the reason. If you're doing that on a regular basis, yeah, you don't have to come here very often, right? Or if you don't have any amenity, anything, if you don't buy new things, if the if this is not dynamic, then you don't have to come every month, right? But of course, location type, for example, this is not going to change, right? Some of them they will not change, right? But some of them, like like small appliances, they may change, right? And you might forget to check or to uncheck, right? And not unchecking, you risk to get a very bad review, right? So this is something that's why I'm bringing this up because uh, the deception, of disappointment, of not seeing something that they expected to see, it could lead to a bad review, and a bad review, it has a terrible impact, right, on any listing. So then everything that we are talking about, how to go the, above and beyond, and then there we are, recovering, the 5-star review or close to 5-star, that we had before, right? So this is why, I'm mentioning that, right? So, but if you don't have many changes, that's okay. Well, I have a question here. Cannot even thank because it's anonymous. If it is a good idea to add baby items, so well, it all again, it depends on the type of listing, right, that you're offering. For example, if you're offering, a baby crib, right, and a good part of your clients, their families with kids, then yes, right, strongly recommend. If not, you know, maybe it doesn't even make difference. And like you mentioned in part of your question, if the cleaning becomes more complex, it doesn't add any value, right? It's all about adding value at the end of the day. Are you adding value to your client? If that's something that is requested very often, yes, you should consider. Yeah, Pascal, thanks for reminding me. The new flexible and moderate cancellation policies now an Airbnb, right, do not include 100% payout to the host in the event of cancellation. Yeah. So this is what I mean. Like, check your cancellation rate, check how much money you lost with cancellation, but at the same time, take into consideration how much more money you made, with flexible cancellation compared to one that is a very strict cancellation policy. I hear your point, and yeah, it is a common point, right? I'm not saying that you're not right, but do the math, right? Do the math because if you If you go with a very strict one, maybe the overall revenue is not that high that compensates, the cancellations, that you have at the end of the year, right? So yeah, again, thinking statistically, not individual cases, right? If you look at the individual cases, you're going to get upset. Wow, I got a cancellation here. I was not expecting. All right, so look over 12 months period, and try to understand, or even, 6 months. Okay, good question here. Olivia is asking, do Vrbo charge fees to owner if they cancel a booking? So if it is a verbal reservation, I don't know. Let me see if I have a verbal reservation here. I don't think I have here. All right. So if you cancel a verbal reservation and don't want to get penalized, right? Because it's not only the amount, but it's also uh, the number of cancellations that you have will count against you to become a premier host, right? And in 2026, they're going to have on the listing level, just like Airbnb, right? So you'll be you have a badge for the host and you also have a badge for the listing, right? But you have different choices here, right? So you can't select if it is from the owner that a property became unavailable and property manager cannot rebook to a different unit. Okay, so that's a big red flag for any channel, right? So if you talk about Airbnb, Vrbo, or Booking, with any channel, because the experience that you're giving to the guest is a terrible one, right? So you don't want to book your entire vacation, right? Just to realize that someone just canceled, your reservation. But if it is the traveler, you have to select the option that is the traveler that decided to cancel, right? So that's a different thing. But canceling the reservation, without at least negotiating with the traveler, getting some sort of agreement, yeah, that's not recommended at all, right? But we have the option, and each channel works in a different way, right? So Vrbo API, they accept, that we select here the specific reasons, right? Some channels, like Bookie.com, for example, they accept that you mark the card as invalid from Hostaway side, and then after some time, if the card continues to be invalid, then you can cancel the reservation without penalties. So, and it is payment related, right? So for no payment, you can also cancel the reservation. So there are different reasons, that you can cancel that will not impact you negatively. Okay. Okay, Denise is asking me about the recap for this webinar. Denise, if you're here, it's because you registered. You will receive the link. I told at the beginning, of the office hours. Yes, everyone that is here and everyone that registered will receive a link to watch it later, right? So in case next time you see it on your dashboard, and you want to watch it, and even if you cannot show up, that is possible. Another thing that is important that I haven't shared yet is the link for additional assistance, right? As always, many of the things that we discussed here, that we covered. Maybe you need help for implementation, right? Or maybe you need help with anything else. We are also here for that as well, right? So I'm going to share this. All I ask is that you provide your email so my team can contact you, your account ID, your name, and the reason, just to give an idea, on, what kind of help do you need, right? So it could be related to what we discussed today, or it could be completely unrelated, but just because you need help and you are here, and you realize, right? So here is the link, and I'm sharing here in the chat with everyone. So please do not hesitate, to share any information here, and I'll have someone from my team, reaching out to you, right? All right, I got a question here from Nico. Are damage deposits for pets a common practice? Is there a way to flag it so that the deposit can be returned promptly? Okay, Nico, you're probably still going through the onboarding, because it is something that is usually addressed during the onboarding, right? So here on the gas payment, right? So this is what I'm talking about, payment schedule, right? So we can have uh add an auto payment, right? So this one, it has one charge only, and it's going to happen 1 hour after the reservation. So that's a very strict payment schedule, right? But you can split the charges, right? Or you can send this to be closer from arrival, right? So, or you can split like 50% deposit now, 50% near the check-in. So this is what I'm talking about, the flexibility, right? But in addition to that, you can schedule, right? Here, instead of a charge, you can set up a pre-authorization, right? So to answer your question, you instead of collecting a damage deposit, right, that will have to increase the price of the reservation. First, you have to pay taxes, have to pay processing fees, many things you have to pay on top of that. And also you have to add to your operational work, you also have to include the refund, right? So when do you refund? How do you refund? Depending on the number of listings that you're managing, this become a burden, right? A lot of work and inefficient. So my recommendation in that case, if you want to add a deposit, because of that, just add a pre-authorization in general, right? Assuming that you don't have insurance, right? Insurance would be what my first recommendation for that. But let's say you want to add something just to be on the safe side, like a security deposit. Instead of charging, if you select the pre-authorization, it will place a hold on the gas card, right? So if the dog, the pet, damages something to your property, you can charge. Of course, make sure that this is clear on the terms and conditions, rental agreement, or anything that you're using, for that reason. And then you can capture the amount in case there is a damage, right? Why a pre-authorization is better? First, it doesn't increase your price, it doesn't incur on additional processing fees, and also it is released automatically, right? So Stripe will automatically release like 7 days after the hold was placed on the card, right? So you are not charging the card, you are just placing a hold. And how do you do that? You can add here. I recommend to put close from the checkout, because it's at the checkout that the cleaner will realize that there was a damage, at the place, right? So it's good that the 7 days window is still available, for you to collect that amount. And on the listing, before the reservation come in, you can come here and you add here a refundable damage deposit, let's say, I don't know, maybe 500, and you select to exclude from the reservation sum, right? So that way you're placing a hold, but this hold is not increasing the price of the reservation, right? So the guest will not think twice, hey, but this is more expensive than the other one because the hold doesn't count, right? It is important to inform the guest that you're doing that. You can add that to the rental agreement, or you can add that to the communication with the guest. But other than that, you can do that. It doesn't cost anything to anyone. Just in case there is a damage, then you can capture the amount and you can do it directly from Hostaway, right? But if you need help to implement that, yeah, I recommend you to schedule a call, right, on the link that I just shared in the chat. Schedule a call and someone will assist you. If you're still in onboarding, just ask your onboarding specialist to assist you with that. All right. Wow. Getting closer to the end here. Let me see if I can answer still one more question. Okay, Bessie is asking a good question here. I sometimes see reservations that come in from Hostaway, which would say Vrbo, and other times it says Expedia. And when I go into Partner Central, it says that the reservation is from Vrbo. What is the difference? Okay, so if you accept instant booking, you know, there is another advantage, on the instant booking, not only inside Vrbo, but also remember, right? So we were talking about instant bookable, right? If Expedia has a guest that is visiting their app or their website, and they're looking for a property to stay in your area, you know, eh, well, Expedia Holding owns Expedia Channel and they own Vrbo, right? They are all part of the same holding. So what will happen is Expedia Channel, they share the inventory that Vrbo has with their clients. So that's why the reservation will come through Vrbo, but it will show as Expedia because it was an Expedia guest that made the reservation, right? But technically it is a Vrbo reservation here inside Hostaway because your listing was listed on Vrbo, and Vrbo shared their inventory of listings, like yours, for example, with Expedia, right? So in a different way, you just explained another advantage, indirect advantage of using instant bookings, because Expedia might share that with their guests, right? Which is great, right? So you're listing on Vrbo and also getting reservations from Expedia. So that's the reason why, right? So they are Vrbo reservations, but they were booked through Expedia. All right. Okay. I have to end our office hour today. So I appreciate all the questions, all the engagement, and your participation here. Appreciate, and I see you next time. You will receive the recording tomorrow. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye.